You are Locked On Pistons Postcast, part of Locked On Sports Detroit, on the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.
Woof. What an ugly game. But hey, how about a Pistons victory 2-0 in the new calendar year of 2025 as Detroit knocks off the Charlotte Hornets and holds on to survive at home 98-90 for the final. Welcome in to a live Locked On Pistons postcast show. I'm your host, Jake Riepma. You can follow me on Twitter at Jake_Riepma, and this is the Locked On Pistons postcast. It's the post-game show on Locked On Sports Detroit, and as always, fired up to be with you and fired up to have you along on another victorious post-game show. As always, want to thank everybody for tuning in, and don't forget that your favorite postcast, podcast, whatever you want to call it, now has a newsletter. That's right. The Locked On Pistons newsletter is free and available wherever you get your podcasts. And all you have to do is sign up for your one-stop ultimate team and league coverage, and it's delivered right to your inbox. Sign up for free at LockedOnDaily.com. That's LockedOnDaily.com. And start your day with the all-new free Locked On Pistons newsletter. And as always, shout out to Koo on the Daily Show, the Locked On Pistons Daily Show. Make sure you subscribe if you haven't already. Tremendous insight. And make sure you subscribe to us, too, on Locked On Sports Detroit, because we've got the instant reaction for you, always live and taking your comments, which is your cue to get in that comment section right away. Want to give a huge shout out to our presenting sponsor of this Pistons postcast, making the show possible. Give it up for America's #1 sportsbook. You know by now, it's FanDuel. The NFL playoffs are almost here, but it's not too late to get in on the regular season action with FanDuel, because right now, new customers can finish the season strong with $250 in bonus bets if your first $5 bet wins. Visit FanDuel.com to get started. And all of us here in Detroit know how big the final game of the regular season will be. I've got my Lions hat on. I've also got my Oakland Golden Grizzlies sweatshirt on. So shout out to the Oakland Golden Grizzlies as well. Used to call play-by-play for the women's basketball program there. But for the Lions, huge regular season game to close out the season on Sunday. Make sure you join us for a Locked On Lions postcast immediately following Sunday Night Football. But what do we got going on the show? The Pistons overcome a slow start versus the Hornets. Tobias Harris played really well in the absence of Jaden Ivy in the Pistons' first game after he broke his fibula. And of course, we close it out with our studs and duds. So come along and let's get it going on a live Locked On Pistons postcast. We begin with that horrific start. It was atrocious. And if you ask me, when all of the conversation goes around the National Basketball Association and why their ratings are struggling, and people maybe make the claim that it's a tough product to watch at times, show them the first half of this game. It was brutal. Now, give the Hornets some credit. They're riding an 8-game losing streak coming into this one, but still came out ready to play and played pretty well in that opening quarter. And in that opening half in particular, got to give credit to Miles Bridges. He didn't necessarily finish the game particularly well for the Hornets, but 20 points overall. And the way the Hornets finished the opening half with that 3 at the buzzer by Miles Bridges, they went into the locker room with all of the momentum. And I thought it was the perfect line on the halftime show. Credit to Mickey York on that. I'm sorry, not that. I didn't say it wrong. On FanDuel Sports Network, I almost had a slip of the tongue there. On FanDuel Sports Network, what Mickey York said was this Pistons team needs some smelling salts at halftime. And I think he was exactly right with that. And whatever JB Bickerstaff and company said at the halftime break, it was a much different effort from the Pistons, specifically on the defensive end in that second half, which you love to see. Some other notes that I wrote down. Cade Cunningham was battling foul trouble in this one throughout, and especially into that second half. And when he picked up his fifth foul with 8:24 to go, it's almost like the Pistons had a heightened sense of awareness that they needed to step up the game in his absence, and especially on the defensive end. Let me know what you thought of that, or if you picked up on that in the comments. But I thought the concerted effort on the defensive end in the absence of Cade Cunningham when he was sidelined with the 5 fouls was a major difference in this game. And you can point to a lot of different plays in where you saw that defensive pressure and that defensive effort turned up. But the one that stood out for me was the Isaiah Stewart chase down block. He was at the complete other end of the floor, chases down the block, and it turns into a dunk on the other end for Tobias Harris. But there was a Tim Hardaway Jr. offensive foul. It was kind of a, I think you use the term out of sync or whatever it was, wonky, whatever phrasing you want to use, but both for the officials and just about for everybody tonight, this game didn't really have a lot of rhythm, and that was an example of one of the wonky plays. But on the front half of that play, it was Isaiah Stewart chasing down a block with excellent effort on the defensive side that it really exemplified how this Pistons team played defense throughout the course of the second half. But on the flip side, it was Tim Hardaway Jr. committing a silly and unnecessary offensive foul to try to hold off that Hornets defender to allow for the dunk for Tobias Harris, even though he was already at the rim. So on one hand, you love the defensive effort from Isaiah Stewart. On the other hand, you got to be smarter if you're Tim Hardaway Jr. in that instance. Some other kind of standout plays, the Pistons were able to hold the Hornets without a field goal for 5 minutes in the latter portion of that fourth quarter. And in the midst of that, the Hornets were able to get back a field goal. Their only field goal in that span, I should say, was after Jalen Duren missed that dunk and Miles Bridges had an easy breakaway dunk on the other side. So again, going back to that theme of just some wonky, mishaps throughout the course of this game from both teams, that missed dunk by Jalen Duren was an example of that as well. But in the end, it's a victory for the Detroit Pistons. I think it helped playing a shorthanded Hornets team that didn't necessarily take full advantage of the open looks that they got at times. Nobody really stood out in this one as far as an excellent performer other than Tobias Harris with his 24 points. But shooting the ball, the Hornets shot 41% from the floor, the Pistons 41%, or nearly 42%, I should say, at 41.9. So nothing really crazy there. The Pistons missed a lot of free throws, especially down the stretch. At one point, they missed 4 in a row. They finished 8 of 13. The Hornets 19 of 13 from the stripe. So 63%, 61%, not exactly lighting the nylon on fire there. And as far as turnovers, nothing too drastic or out of the ordinary on the stat sheet. 18 turnovers for the Hornets compared to 15 for the Pistons. So again, it really wasn't, this was a game that felt like it didn't have a lot of flair or personality, if you will. The largest lead for the Hornets was 13 at the halftime break. For the Pistons, it was 7. But in the end, it's a 98-94 victory. And I'll say it, I think it was an ugly game and at times hard to watch. And part of the reason the NBA ratings are not exactly through the roof right now were games like these. But we're going to continue to break it down. We'll go in depth on Tobias Harris in our upcoming segment, and we'll also take your comments. So make sure you get your comments in. A lot of questions in this one. Maybe you saw something I didn't as far as my overview of this game just being an ugly survival mission for the Pistons to ultimately come away with the win against an inferior Charlotte Hornets team. So we'll take a quick timeout and be back to break down Tobias Harris's game as well as our studs and duds. That's still to come, and your comments on a live Locked On Pistons postcast here on Locked On Sports Detroit. This episode of the Locked On Pistons postcast is brought to you by FanDuel, America's #1 sports book. Hey, listen up. Go right now, FanDuel.com. The NFL playoffs are almost here, but it's not too late to get in on the regular season action. We got one more weekend of regular season football, so get in on the action with FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. Right now, new customers can finish the season strong with $250 in bonus bets if your first $5 bet wins. FanDuel has so many ways for you to pick up those W's. I love betting on Jared Goff. Jared Goff. Listen, he has torched Robert Flores' Vikings defense in his last 3 starts. So that is something I'm going to be all over on Sunday Night Football. He's at home, indoor environment, crowd behind him. Jared Goff. I love getting in on the action. Just visit FanDuel.com to join today. That's FanDuel.com for your chance at $250 in bonus bets. Make every moment more with FanDuel, an official sportsbook partner of the NFL. Pistons outlast the Charlotte Hornets. The Hornets have lost 9 in a row. The Pistons have won 2 in a row, and it was the first game since Jaden Ivy went down with the broken fibula. So, of course, we didn't have a show. I was traveling for the holidays after that game, but worth pointing out that I think I echoed all of the Detroit Pistons fans and the sentiments that were shared on social media. Thoughts and prayers going out to Jaden Ivy. You know, he'll be back and better than ever. And I think in some roundabout way, you can make the case that the news, albeit obviously not what you want, it might not have been as catastrophic for the season as originally thought. And that's, of course, in hopes of Jaden Ivy making a full recovery, which we're hopeful that he will. And we know he'll attack that rehab with everything that he has. Now, as for tonight, Pistons beat the Hornets 98-94, 16-18 on the season, 7-8 at home in JB Bickerstaff's first season at the helm. Lots to break down, and I know we're not at the halfway point of the season yet by any means. Still got the All-Star break and everything ahead, but you take the pulse and take the temperature of where this Pistons team is at. Obviously, the Jaden Ivey injury is a huge blow. And the question still remains. I don't think a one-game sample size answers that question of how this team will essentially respond, and not only respond, but replace the scoring and mitigate the absence that Jaden Ivey leaves in the offensive lineup and really just on the floor in his presence overall. So that will, of course, remain to be seen. But Tobias Harris did a nice job in game number 1 in stepping up and filling a void, especially with Cade Cunningham in as much foul trouble as he had. Tobias finishes with 24 points on 9 of 16 shooting. So a nice night there for Harris in 36 minutes. He was plus 10, also added 10 rebounds, and just seemed more involved, more active, more assertive, all of the things you like to see from as George Blaha always calls him, a pro's pro and a savvy, heady player in Tobias Harris. Now, let's get to your comments. It has been too long since we took the temperature from our viewers, and that's what makes a live Locked On Pistons postcast so fun. We can get your comments right away. Here we go. This was a game that the players on both teams looked like they were trying to lose. I know it's not true, but missing free throws at an insane rate and airballing threes. Yeah, I know on the broadcast, which I know why, and there's some truth to it too, but Special K and George Blaha going to chalk it up to good defense, but I think at times it was poor offense as well. And the Pistons had a couple of instances in which they did turn up the defensive pressure, but for the most part, I mean, maybe not for the most part, let me back that up, but there were instances in which both teams were just not looking like NBA franchises. In fact, they were looking a little bit lost out there, as our commenters suggest. Demetrius McNeil, 1. I was at Little Caesars Arena with the special population group. Love that. Let's go, Demetrius McNeil. Shout out to you at the game. The other, Beef Stew's impact on defense turns the game around in the second half after trailing by 15 points. Exactly. They trailed by 13 13 at the break, but I totally get your point, Demetrius, and I completely agree. I touched on it. I don't know if you made that comment as I was touching on the chase down block by Isaiah Stewart, but that's what you love to see from an energy player like Isaiah Stewart, and who has to impact the game in other ways aside from just scoring. Daniel Berry Sports Highlights checking in. What's up, everyone? Love that. Mr. My City, Pistons win, refs lose. Yeah, the officiating wasn't great tonight. I'm usually not, and I even hate talking about the officials. In fact, those that know me know I'm a huge college football fan, and not to derail us too much here, but there was a lot of talk of the officiating in the college football playoff games over the week, or not over the weekend, over the break, on New Year's Day and so on and so forth. But I hate incorporating the officiating as part of the conversation, just because I never want to be the guy that blames the refs. And in this case, with the Pistons still winning, nobody's blaming the refs, but there were certainly some missed calls. There's no doubt about it. Mr. My City, Beasley had his worst shooting night as a Piston, while Tobias has finally showed up in consecutive games. Yeah, that's worth pointing out. I didn't want to hammer down too much on Beasley, although we will hear his name again in the studs and duds portion of the program, but he looked like just a little out of sync. And I think as a volume shooter, which we've all acknowledged he is, coming off the bench, there can be difficulties in getting started, and being out of sync and out of rhythm can happen from time to time. And he was 1 of 10 from the long line tonight. We know he's a shooter. He's going to jack up a lot of 3-pointers, and that's today's NBA, and so on and so forth. And I'm not making excuses for him. It doesn't condone or justify the poor performance tonight, but we hadn't seen a stinker like this from Malik Beasley since he's been in a Pistons uniform. But tonight, 1 of 10 from 3-point land, and the Pistons were able to still win this ball game 98-94. So we'll take that. But as for Tobias Harris, I mentioned his splits. Really liked what you saw from him today. There's no doubt about it. One more comment here from Mr. My City. The block, fast break, and Asar dunk changed the vibe after that. That disastrous close to the first half. Yeah, that's a good point too. That was part of that resurgent third quarter that the Pistons frankly needed. And I was nervous at the halftime break for how poorly they played in that opening half, that they wouldn't be able to overcome it. And maybe it was just a night of that they were sleepwalking at home. And fortunately, they weren't. Organic Lindo, those refs need to be investigated. I don't think it was that egregious, but it certainly wasn't one of those high achieving grades that refs look for after the conclusion of a ball game. So that being said, let's go ahead and take one more timeout. We'll come back with our studs and duds. Don't go anywhere. We are cruising on a live Locked On Pistons postcast here on the Locked On Sports Detroit page. When we come back, studs and duds, and one of my studs might surprise you here on the Locked On Pistons postcast on Locked On Sports Detroit. Hey, this episode of the Locked On Pistons postcast is brought to you by Game Time, the best ticketing app in the world. That's as simple as I can make it. Listen, if you follow me on social media, Twitter, Instagram, I love going to games and even doing live shows after games. But I'm a fan. I still buy my ticket to get to games, and nothing was different than that case on Monday Night Football, going to see the Detroit Lions knock off the San Francisco 49ers at Levi's Stadium in Santa Clara. And you know what? Use the Game Time app to get that ticket. I love going to live events, whether it's sports, music, theater, or comedy. And one of my favorite memories was, in fact, going to the Lions playoff game at home last year against the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. You just can't match that energy and excitement inside Ford Field. Game Time has made it easier than ever to get tickets to your favorite events with new features, Game Time Picks. This feature filters out the fluff to show you only incredible deals on great seats, so you don't waste time searching through thousands of ticket options. Now, my favorite part about the Game Time ticketing app is you turn on that all-in price feature, because just give me the bottom line, right? That's what you want when you're looking to buy those tickets to live events, you don't want all the fees at checkout. So make sure you toggle this feature in the app because it is the best. So take the guesswork out of buying tickets with Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDON NBA for $20 off your first purchase. Locked On NBA for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply, but create that account. Redeem the code LOCKEDONNBA. That's Locked On NBA for $20 off your first purchase. Download the Game Time app today. And I ask you, what time is it? It's game time. Pistons win 2-0 in the new year in 2025, which, since this is our first Locked On Pistons postcast of the new year, forgive me for not wishing everyone a happy new year. It's January 3rd, so I still think we have that window of being able to wish people a happy new year. Some programming announcements. Of course, Pistons back in action tomorrow against the Minnesota Timberwolves, so we'll have a live Pistons postcast after that. And what's the postcast, you ask? Well, it's just simply the post-game show right here on the Locked On Sports Network. So we've got Locked On Sports Detroit as our home base for everything on YouTube. Go ahead and subscribe. And the audio side of things, you can catch every show on Locked On Pistons, wherever you get your podcast, and of course, free and available like always. Now, let me know in the comments your studs and duds as well, because I'm always curious if everybody's on the same wavelength as me, or if maybe I'm just a little bit crazy, which we know can happen from time to time. A couple more comments to get to before we get into our studs and duds. Mary Jo Isaacson, my grandmother, at the game tonight with some of my family members. Love to see that. You know, she's always at the games, whether it's the Lions, whether it's the Pistons or the Tigers. They're always at the park. Great win. First game at a LCA. That's right. They hadn't been to LCA for a Pistons game. Tigers and Lions at Ford Field, that's a whole different story. Season ticket holders there. But glad the Pistons came through for him, even though it was kind of an ugly game as far as the offensive side of things. But hey, a win is a win is a win. I'd rather win ugly than lose cute. Now, studs and duds. We'll start with the stud. We'll keep it positive in the new year. And it was, of course, Tobias Harris, our player of the game. Tobias Harris in 34 minutes. You got to give it up to him. 36 minutes, rather. 24 points. He was plus 10. And in a game where the Pistons really needed him because Cade Cunningham was sidelined with foul trouble. And we talked about the struggles Malik Beasley had, 1 of 10 from the long line. And with Jaden Ivy out, you're really running out of options at that point for consistent scoring. Tobias Harris provided it. 9 of 16 and 4 of 5 from the three-point line, 9 of 16 from the floor, I should say. And here's a rare occasion, did not miss at the free throw line. I should say rare occasion in the sense that everybody was missing tonight from the foul line. All the Pistons didn't really shoot that many free throws. But that being said, he was 2 for 2 from the free throw line. Not that that's some telling statistic, but just thought I would mention it. And the 10 rebounds to go along with the 3 steals. So he was active on defense as well. All in all, stud of the game, it's Tobias Harris, part of our studs and duds here on the Locked On Pistons post-game show, the postcast, which we love to see. All right, duds, Malik Beasley, and this is not just piling on Malik Beasley. Like I said in the previous segment, those nights are going to happen from time to time. He wasn't great. He'll be better. And it was an off night, and I think we can leave it at that. 1 of 10 from the long line. He's a volume shooter. Didn't have it tonight. There it is. That's all there really is to lay into on that. A couple more comments. We've got Mr. My City, Wendell Moore, starting to take me by surprise. Seems JB is going to let Threasley, I like that. Let Threasley go for that 6 man. I believe he can get it. It is his shot. Won't be off for long. Still top 3-point made in whole league. Yep, completely agree. I just, if we're having the same conversation on a more consistent basis, then yeah, we've got something to explore there. But one night here, one night there, it was an off night for Malik Beasley. He will bounce back, and he doesn't have to wait long to bounce back because the Detroit Pistons are right back in action tomorrow night at home against the Minnesota Timberwolves, and we'll see if they can get a little nice 3-game winning streak going, as they have won their first 2 games here after a really, really good West Coast road trip. And I know I was on after the Sacramento Kings win, which then we all know what happened after that. The Kings fired Mike Brown, but that was a really exciting win, of course, with Jaden Ivey's 4-point play. And unfortunately, we know what happened with Jaden Ivey in the injury against the Orlando Magic. But hey, it's a roller coaster season. We knew that. But where this team is at, you got to feel really good. And I know it's not just the record, but 16 wins and playing the brand of basketball that they are. There's some frustrating nights, absolutely. There's some nights that really have you going and feeling like a believer. And then there's nights like tonight where, hey, it's a grind in the National Basketball Association, and sometimes you just have to win ugly the way the Pistons did tonight with the win over the Hornets. And hey, they've lost 9 in a row, so glad that the Pistons weren't the team that ended that losing streak. 98-94 the final in this one. And as always, a few programming reminders. Locked On Pistons postcast tomorrow night. Locked On Lions postcast, the postgame show after the Lions game on Sunday Night Football. And it all happens right here on Locked On Sports Detroit. All right. Want to thank everybody for tuning in. Don't forget, and if you forget this, oh my goodness, what am I going to do with you guys? Your favorite podcast now is a newsletter introducing the Locked On Pistons. Daily newsletters, your one stop for ultimate team and league coverage delivered right to your inbox. Sign up for free right now at LockedOnDaily.com. That's LockedOnDaily.com, and start your day with the all-new free Locked On Pistons newsletter. Make sure you check out Locked On Pistons on the Daily Show. If you missed anything, you can hear the audio version on any of the audio platforms. Locked On Pistons, of course, the postcast audio will be on Locked On Pistons. Locked On Lions postcast, the audio will be on Locked On Lions, and so on and so forth. Or everything is on YouTube at Locked On Sports Detroit. So make sure you subscribe as well. My name is Jake Rietma, formerly with 97.1 The Ticket, and now with Locked On Sports Detroit, and fired up to do so, and looking forward to what should be a really, really fun and exciting 2025. In all aspects, it's great to be a Detroit sports fan. Have a wonderful night, everyone, and we'll see you next time on the Locked On Pistons postcast here on Locked On Sports Detroit.